over your ears. So take it away, Dave and Mecky.
Welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave.
And Mecky.
On WZZR, broadcasting from Australia for Revolution. I'll put my teeth back in. For Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com, where it's more than just radio, so jump into the chat room if you can. This is show number 278. 278. It's on air, online, and on your smart device, so grab an app to listen anywhere or listen at home on a Grace tabletop digital radio. If you missed it, Solara's show with Steve Colburn and Misha Johnson talking about contactees, implants, and mind control was awesome. And if you're watching this on YouTube, get yourself into the archives. And you know what? It only costs $5 a month to access the Freedom Slips archives and check out her shows. You can check out all of her shows. It's only a cost of one coffee per month. I'm actually subscribed. You should too. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Darkinjung people, and the Daruk people, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and future. Welcome aboard with us, Dave and Mecky and Shiny Side Out. Mecky, how are you?
I'm excellent. How are you, my friend?
Oh, what's the psychological term for using humor to avoid despair? Whatever that is, that's what I'm doing at the moment.
Well, that's actually it's classified as a defense mechanism. It's psychological.
Yeah, there you go.
But of course you're not doing that. You're just humorous because you're just a funny guy that laughs and doesn't cry. Otherwise,
no,
you wouldn't suffer from some kind of psychological defect, wouldn't you?
Oh, well, that's true. No, today, today's show 278 is in memory of 70 and 200.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
That's right, sir. Go on.
870 and 200. This show is in memory of our cat Gershwin, who passed away today. 21 years old.
Human years.
21 human years.
That's right.
My goodness me. It's a bit hard to take. Someone that's been with you for so long and shared so much, but we wish him well wherever he is now, in the great pastures with catnip in the sky. There's no pain where he is now, so it's good to know. Having said that, that's you got to laugh, don't you? Really, it's been hard on all of us, I have to tell you. So, but look, it could be worse. It could be worse. Mecky, in the news this week, I keep talking about, Trump doing this and Trump doing that and warfare this and China that and North Korea and Syria. Well, what, honestly, I mean, if the media is to be believed and North Korea did in fact launch another, it looks like another ballistic missile test. And just for those people who don't know what a ballistic missile is, and I said missile, not missile. That's what we say in Australia, missile. A ballistic missile is one that only has power to go up, and then in the true ballistic sense of a projectile that's non-powered will fall towards its target. Not steerable, nothing to do with any. You just fire it in that direction. It's going to land on the target. That's ballistic missile. So intercontinental ballistic means that it usually reaches a low orbit and then comes back down again. The distances between continents is rather large, and so you have to put it up further and higher, and given a payload of a nuclear weapon or something like that, it's an awfully large device. It's not a very small thing you can make in your backyard. So who's selling them these things, I don't know. But the rhetoric this week, obviously, is that, there was a special convention of the UN, Mecky, and the rhetoric in the across all the media is we have to do something about it. Let's put more sanctions on them. Sanctions, really?
Because they really worked well the first time around, right? I mean,
they're still working from last time, aren't they?
It was a resounding success. Oh, absolutely.
So look, because of the rhetoric, I come from a position, a pre-programmed position, already by the media, that says we need to do something about it. However, that's my pre-programmed response. That's what the government and the advertising companies and the media is trying to do. That's their narrative, not mine. Mine is, screw it, I don't care. Has he put any actual media out, Mekki? Has he stood in front of cameras saying, I'm going to blow you all up? No. Not officially, right?
Look, the thing is this, though, right? You have to look at it from every angle, and Dave is right. He hasn't made any direct... Well, sorry, that's not true. He has made direct threats, but let's be very clear here. Iraq, invaded by the US, no weapons of mass destruction. Afghanistan, invaded by the US, no weapons of mass destruction. Vietnam invaded by the... Oh, no, actually, that's not true. They were asked for help, but be that as may, no weapons of mass destruction. Syria, as far as we know, no weapons of mass destruction. In fact, ISIS has no weapons of mass destruction. Now, all of these things have a common theme here. If you're a nuclear power, chances are that you're not going to be invaded by the United States of America. So now, why? So the thing is this: why people ask why are all these dictators, racing to get these nuclear weapons? Because it's insurance. It's an insurance policy. It is the same kind of insane insurance policy that kept the Cold War going and kept us from nuclear holocaust in the 50s and 60s and then later on the 70s.
And the big reason why is because of MAD.
Yeah.
Mutually assured destruction.
That's the one. So I can't blame these call them rogue states. I don't care what you want to call them. I can't blame them for trying to get nuclear weapons because for them that's an insurance policy. If I have them, I will not be attacked. I will not be invaded. And I don't think that'll happen now either. Is North Korea crazy enough to launch a preemptive strike on anyone, even South Korea? I don't think so. I mean, hey, famous last words, but still, I really don't think so because they will not win. You can't win. If he launches whatever missiles he has, nuclear or otherwise, it'll be done pretty quick, and it'll be weeks before the rest of the world finished bombing him. And North Korea would be a very nice, very level glass plateau, cooling glass plateau.
Lovely new landscape created there for prime for development, Mekki, I must say.
But think about it. I mean, it could be turned into a massive mirror that could be seen from outer space. But look, the thing is this: do I think that
Mekki's making reference to what happens to sand after a nuclear explosion? It does turn to glass.
Exactly right. Now, do I think that North Korea should have nuclear weapons? Absolutely not. Do I think that anybody should have nuclear weapons? I don't think so. Do I think that we should weaponize viruses and bacteria? No, we should not weaponize viruses.
But that's still going on. We do it
because we are the killer monkey that doesn't get that doesn't seem to get it. We don't get smarter with the things that we know. We just get more bloodthirsty and greedy. And this is really the problem, guys. Our nature, human nature, is the issue here, and maybe even directed human nature. And I still believe very strongly that we are being forced in one direction by, well, whoever, who I think it is, and it is leading to our destruction. Not complete destruction, mind you, but just enough to start again. And I think that has happened many, many times in the past. So now we're looking at a potentially nuclear-armed North Korea. That's not good for anyone. Again, I understand why they want to do it, though. But what will China do? What will the US do? Is this the spark that will ignite what could arguably be a catastrophic development. And the thing is this: we should never forget that people never really thought the wars that came along had would have the impact that they did. I mean, everybody was expecting World War One, and people were quite happy when it came. Let's march to war. Yeah, rah, rah, rah. It was horrific. Right? It was a horrific thing that killed millions of people and soldiers and all that. Then World War II came along, and nobody thought that World War II could happen. People just didn't think that World War II was possible after World War One. It's just,
right.
it was inconceivable. What it was, it happened. And ever since then, we've had conflicts of smaller and larger proportions across the globe. Is there another global conflict on the horizon? There always is. And it's just because we are the killer monkey. There always is another conflict on the horizon. And this is what Einstein said when he was asked what kind of weapons did he think would be used in World War III. And Einstein said, I have no idea. But I can tell you what weapons will be used in World War IV. Rocks and clubs.
That's
Rocks and clubs. And of course, if there were even if it's a non-nuclear, like a conventional exchange of but a global conflict. Let's say for argument between China and the US and Russia, or India, whoever, like these major powers in the world, right? Everybody would get dragged into it. Even conventionally, we've got the power to cause some serious damage, right? And it would not be the same. The destruction would be unimaginable. The loss of life would be unimaginable. And it's not something that we should hope for in any sense. Even some of us believe, it's the rapture, it's the second coming. No, guys. What if you're wrong? What if you're wrong? What if it isn't? Because if you survive, especially if you're a prepper, you'll still be around to live with the aftermath. Okay, so let's not work towards it. I know some people are actively trying to encourage this kind of conflict. Mm-hmm. I strongly urge you to cease and desist, because nobody is going to win. Okay, nobody. But look, other than that, Dave, there wasn't actually terribly much that happened in the news as such. I've got some interesting insights into because I was talking to a friend around Australian politics and just the level of corruption that exists on a global scale in politics. When we're talking about politicians, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, politicians stealing billions of dollars, and left, right, and center. It's insane. It's look. This is a funny story I was told. I'll tell you. This is actually funny. In Singapore and in Malaysia, Malaysia and Singapore both, you're not allowed to own guns. So, gun control is very tough. In fact, if they find a bullet in your house, you can go to jail for 20 years. So that's actually what happened to some of the political opposition. They found bullets in their houses, not a gun anywhere, but bullets, right? And that was enough to throw some of these political oppositional players in jail, or for 10, 20 years, just the bullets, because it's much easier to plant a bullet than it is to plant a gun, right? It's just a bullet. It's a bullet. Lock him up. Even if you bring a bullet in from, I don't know, Vietnam, like from one of those the outdoor shooting ranges, and they make a little chain out of it for you, you could potentially go to jail for that. So don't bring.
That is crazy.
Yes, I know, right? I didn't know that. So don't bring it. Don't bring any bullets with you if you go into Singapore or Malaysia. So that's a bad idea, guys. Right? don't do that. Other than that, though, I have to say it's. Go on. Yep.
I've got something to bring up. We know that in the week leading up to the June 21st date this year, in the week leading up to it, there was 464 earthquakes in Yellowstone National Park. New record. And then this week, a 5.8. That was 3 days ago now. The 6th of July, 4:30 p.m. and 5.8 in Yellowstone. Now, I'll talk about the significance in a second, but that's the largest quake in 34 years to have hit the area.
Oh.
Now, the significance is the swarm because they call it an earthquake swarm, and I'm not labeling it that. That's what the not volcanologist, seismologist and volcanologist have determined the term for that, and that is a swarm. When you get a swarm like that around a normal volcano, it's active and you set the clock ticking to an eruption. I'm not saying it's going to happen with this one because I'm not an expert, but the experts are keeping a very close eye on Yellowstone at the moment. Now, the implications of a supervolcano like Yellowstone going off is 2/3 of the US become pretty shortly afterwards, after that goes off, uninhabitable. The croplands cease to exist, and the 2/3 would be covered in at least maybe 1 yard or more of ash from it. It's huge. It would be huge, and it would be certainly within living memory the largest event on the planet. I mean, generationally, the largest event. So what is there in place, just to refresh the people on our listeners, our esteemed listeners, what's already been put in place to counter that as an emergency? Well, I think Ecuador, and certainly Australia, and there's another one, Uruguay, I think it is, are the countries that have an agreement with the US government to resettle people in the event of that emergency taking place. So it's a real threat. Not saying it's a threat, a live threat, but it's certainly a real threat. And they've put things in place to mitigate the severity of that and the people. But certainly that would be a terrible thing. Now, if you're a bad person, just like bad people took advantage of that NSA backdoor into all the devices out there on the planet, like the Windows devices. Well, if you're a bad person, then, and you had nuclear weapons, Mechie, just drop it on Yellowstone. That might make it pop. That's like levering with your thumbnail the champagne cork.
I agree. I just had to look here, and this is from Newsweek, and it's the article.
Yeah.
Well, some of the content is the same as Dave's. Now, the last time Yellowstone erupted was about 640,000 years ago. 640,000 years ago. So quite a while. But at that point, it expelled 240 cubic miles of rock into the air. That's enough to build a small moon, guys. Okay, so
that's no moon, Mechie. That's a space station.
That's a space station.
Now, the evidence of the 2/3 of the continental US being covered in ash is found geologically. You can do cores anywhere you like within that, and that's what they've done, and they've found that that was indeed the outcome. So detrimental to your house, like a 1 yard cubed of this stuff is more than a ton of the ash. And that ash is very fine. It's jagged, and unlike snowflakes, it comes together in weird, globules, which is like cement when it sets if it's wet. Anyway, so your roof on your house will be incapable of holding that weight, and usually collapses the houses. So don't try and stay. Try and get out the moment you hear it's gone. Just vacate. Take what you can. Be the prepper you know you are. And get out, because that could be devastating for... Think about the world economy, Mechie. The world economy would go down the toilet.
Oh, look. Well, if let's say Yellowstone did blow, and essentially it would wipe out the US. That's gone, right? US would be gone. But the knock-on effects, certainly we're looking at a nuclear winter. Maybe for the
Northern Hemisphere at least. Plane flights, all cancelled. You pretty much shut down air travel in the US. And then
globally, there'd be no air travel, right? So no, it would the Earth would come to a standstill. We would be knocked back at least 100 years. I mean, who knows what the other knock-on effects are? I mean, some of the satellites would be destroyed, I would imagine, because some of the debris would make it into low Earth orbit. So It's an extinction level event. No, it wouldn't kill us all, but it would set us back significantly. And the death rate, I would say, would be in the hundreds of millions if Yellowstone did erupt, both directly and from the indirect causes following the event. Yeah, no, nothing easy, right? Nothing nice and light. This is heavy stuff.
It's particularly heavy, and if you were to breathe it in, it'll cut your lungs. So take all the precautions if you're ever in volcanic ash cloud. Yeah. All right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, but that was nice and cheery. Thank you.
Well, that's the kind of day I'm having.
That's who you are. No, that's
well, it is. It's how I'm going today. So, but look, do you know what, Mekki? Just to take us in, to lead us into today's show, I've been talking to a few of my friends about this, and it's exactly where we're going today in our show. So, and that is when I started talking about the Mandela effect and dimensional travelers and is it, and the question was always raised by the person I was talking to, is it a collective false memory? Is that all it is?
Yep.
And I raised the question, like fake news, before it was a thing, and that is, did the media get it wrong? And did they advertise Mandela's death? And only certain people got that news story. Where was our perception of the events different to what was actually out there? And look, they're great questions. But then when I give the example of that South American lady and her job and the car and the bed sheets, and that it's quite possibly the same as if we're all in a computer simulation, maybe a restore had to get done, and some files were of a different era or a different date, even though they were there when they got corrupted. But when they're restored back to a previous week or a previous day, or in advance of that news ever occurring, so they were blissfully unaware that it ever happened. So from a virtual perspective, like we were all living inside the Matrix, and like there was a change made, or only half of us were restored back a certain date. Now, if we're all files in a computer, that seems to make sense, that analogy. But since we believe we're living, breathing things in a real world that's tangible, did it really happen? And why have some people just suddenly found themselves in a different existence? And we're talking about this because the scientists right now are talking about this. They're talking about there being 11 different dimensions. So is it possible that there are more than one, that we could be in another dimension also, living a parallel existence? Well, it's all theorized. And we're not the ones making up the theory. We're bringing it to you and connecting two things which, on its own, the Mandela effect seems like, well, just crazy people forgot the wrong thing. However, it doesn't seem that way when you think about where science is going. No one can even explain what the other dimensions are like. We don't know. I always bring it back to Flatland. But here we are. This is where we're at. We're at this point where we've got some weird stuff going on, and it could be explained by dimensional transference or traveling between dimensions. Or in my example, the restoration of an old file.
So just to bring it to our old friend, quantum mechanics, there is a very, very elegant experiment which we've now talked to death over, which is the double-slit experiment. I won't go over the finer details, but to Dave's point, if you do not observe or measure the outcome of the experiment, the result is a superposition of events, a superposition. If you do observe it, if you do measure it, there's one event that happens, just one reality that's created. But let's talk about superposition for just a second. Superposition means a probability curve. So all events that could happen and could not happen and could conceivably happen. Okay, so all possible outcomes actually happen. And these outcomes are rated on a probability scale, and the most likely outcome, we believe, is the one that we see when we do measure it, right? At least as far as our expectation is concerned, because I believe that the expectation of the observer or the person or the entity that looks at the measurement drives the actual collapse of the wave function. Now, these other superposition probability events do not go away. They just become invisible to us. So to Dave's point, if we are not, in fact, living in a computer simulation, but this is real reality, the other real realities are still there as well. We just can't see them anymore. We can no longer observe them because we have collapsed the superposition into the one reality that we all expect and love, which is this one. And that's really the kicker. So now the question becomes, if that is the truth, so that speaks to the multiverse theory, right? Like the many worlds theory. Then is it possible to go between those probabilities? Is it possible to go between those worlds? And it seems, Dave, that it is. If we look at things like the Mandela effect, like so the Mandela effect, in my mind, that's the mundane stuff, the everyday things. Like if you had these dimensional rifts or dimensional cracks happening on a large scale, you would expect to see something like that, something that's completely trivial. I mean, who cares if a logo changes or a letter changes? It doesn't matter. The bigger events are like what happened to the Spanish lady, where her whole life is not how she remembered it. Now, these are the bigger events, and these are, in my opinion, individual events. The Mandela type events, they are a mass or a mass event in that they affect many people because they're so tiny, right? But the big events where like things have changed dramatically would only affect a few, in my opinion. Again, if you look at it from a I guess common sense perspective, not saying that common sense necessarily applies, and then take it one step further and look at what Charles Fort said. If we looked in the insane asylums and workhouses in his time, looking for people that say they came from another dimension, another world, whatever, we would probably find quite a few. And in fact, today we might. Because the further away you get from this reality, the more insane you would seem to anyone that finds you. Forget about not being able to speak the language, but there would be no cultural connection. Let's say, like I said last time, let's imagine that the Carthaginians or the Empire of Carthage was never wiped out. But let's say Rome lost. Let's say Hannibal had destroyed Rome with his elephants. That was some 2,000 years ago. What would it be different? I mean, I can't even imagine how different the world would be today. Okay, it'd be completely different cultural environment. And let's say you are then cast adrift in a dimension in which that actually happened. The language, forget the language, forget the customs. You would have no cultural context. If you are lucky, they wouldn't kill you out of hand. They would lock you up because you're clearly insane and not fit to live in that society. So that's really where we are. So it's a tough sell because we're talking now about people that we have classified as insane. Now, see, this is where it gets difficult, Dave, because if this is a thing that happens all the time, then we should have quite a few people, sitting in our insane asylums or sanatoriums, or whatever you call them, and there should be but nobody would investigate it either, because clearly that's not something that you would do, because the experts say that something like that simply isn't possible. So we need to investigate this further, because from the smallest, like a déjà vu, for example, right, like a small, tiny, or even a precock dream, or like maybe just a precock that you have in a waking state, to the Mandela effect, to things like dimensional displacement, from maybe 1 month difference in your life to 10 or 100,000 years difference in your cultural environment. Now imagine the scale there, guys. I mean, it just opens up, right? And the further away I think we are from our home world, the less likely we are to encounter someone from very, very far away. So what I mean by that is we are much more likely to come across déjà vu and the Mandela effect than we are from to encounter someone that came from a world where the North American nations had conquered Europe, for example, right? Because it's just further away. But I'm not saying we can't find someone like that. It's just less likely, because if you want to look at it from our limited understanding, it is further away. So it would take a lot more travel, I guess, speaking interdimensionally, to get here.
There's a couple of examples, Mekki, that I'd like to put out there that still survive the test of time, ironically. The time thing. And that is the Voynich manuscript. That's a physical thing. You can examine it yourself. And that appears in a different language with different plants, unless someone from, I don't know, some space traveling person who's been to another planet left it here by mistake. Oops, where's that book? I was, like when Captain Cook went around the world, and he had, who was the botanist on board, Mekki?
With Cook?
Yes.
I can't remember.
Anyway, he had a botanist. He had a botanist on board who was excellent at drawing botanical plants and noting everything they discovered. Well, I mean, is this like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy book of things that people have encountered along the way from a different language? Don't know. However, it's a physical book. It's there, and we've talked about it a lot. But that's one of those physical examples. What about the guy that's on the plane who managed to get on board a plane and land, and for them only to discover that they didn't know where he came from? His passport was issued from a country that doesn't exist, and he swears blind that he pointed out on a map that the country name why doesn't your map show the country that I left from? Does that not make that makes sense to me, that these things are real and they're happening all around us? Mekki's example of there being, people in insane asylums who have declared this and just gone, oh boy, they get another live one, and they stuffed him inside a box that they can't talk to anyone.
Yep.
Right? Now we know science does this. They give it a name and they toss it aside. If your preference in this crazy topsy-turvy world we live in, where near food is the cheaper than real food, right? And available to more people across the planet than real food is, and yet to think that that's not right, and to only expect to want to eat healthily is considered itself crazy, and they've named it. It's an eating disorder now, to only want to eat healthy food. What? That makes no sense, but it's proof that science only wants to pigeonhole it and get it away. They want to stay on the straight and narrow, not look sideways, not look out the side windows to see that all of this stuff that we're talking about, whilst it seems crazy, it's real and it's out there. That's the thing.
Yeah, look. And it is a thing. The thing is that it is a thing, or it seems to be a thing, right? And no, really, because we have the tendency as people to either dismiss things when they happen to us, even though, like this Mandela effect. It's actually, what amazes me is how it resonates with people, Dave. It is such a resonant topic that people feel compelled to comment. There's guys, there are Facebook groups on it. I'm a member of two of them. One is, I think, 20,000 members. The other one is 65,000 members, or something ridiculous, right? So I'm not sure, but it's in the tens of thousands. So that's a significant number of people that are, at the very least, interested, if not having experienced it themselves, notwithstanding the number of trolls that are there. But so it is clearly something that is strange. And like I said as well, remember, this is the first time in the history of the human race that we remember where we can actually compare notes on this scale. We have never been able to compare notes like this before
True.
the internet. I mean, you could talk to people, your neighbors. Oh, yeah, that's a bit odd. But then chances are that within your immediate vicinity, no one had the same, experience that you did. I mean, how many people do you actually know? Think about it. Do you know 100 people, 500, 1,000 people? How many people do you talk to on a regular basis with? Right. So just think about the numbers.
You'd find your perspective was isolated rather quickly.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas today, you can communicate instantaneously with tens of thousands. Like right now, Dave and I, we talk to
right now.
Well, we'll talk hopefully to more than 10 people. But the point is, the potential for this radio show alone is millions of people could be listening, right? I'm not saying there are, but that's what could happen. On the internet, millions of people can read a post, or YouTube or videos or whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden, your isolated experience becomes exposed to people everywhere on the planet. No longer are you limited by your immediate surroundings. Even if you're a very popular person that talks to everybody all the time, chances are that you don't speak to thousands of people any given moment, right? Or even in the course of a year, you might not speak to that many people. Now you can do it instantaneously. So that's why I think that these things are coming out. I don't think the Mandela effect would have been a thing before the internet. I just simply think it wouldn't be possible for it to reach enough people to become critical, right?
It wouldn't have hit critical mass, no.
Yeah, completely, right? So that's really the point here. Because people say, oh, how come people didn't talk about that before? Well, they probably did, but they just didn't reach enough interested people.
Exactly.
Right? That's really it. But we do have a couple more articles to share with you guys, and as Dave so nicely segued earlier, the first one is around collective false memories, right? And this was written February 16, 2017 by Caitlin Armaud. Dave, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, she says, would you trust a memory that felt as real as all your other memories? And if other people confirmed that they remembered it too, what if the memory turned out to be false? This scenario was named the Mandela effect by the self-described paranormal consultant Fiona Broome, after she discovered that other people shared her false memory of the South African civil rights leader Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 80s. And I've got my hand up because I remember that story being released by the media. Is a shared false memory really due to so-called glitch in the matrix? Or is there some other explanation for what's happening? Broome attributes this disparity to the many worlds or multiverse interpretation of quantum mechanics. When not directly observed, electrons and other subatomic particles diffract like waves, only to behave like particles when a measurement is made. Essentially, it's as if these particles exist in multiple places simultaneously until directly observed. And Mecki pointed that out a little earlier. The Nobel Prize-winning physicist Erwin Schrödinger explained this strange concept with the Schrödinger's cat thought experiment in 1935. It's almost coming up to 100 years. If a cat were placed in a box with a radioactive decay detector rigged to break a flask of poison when activated, a decaying particle existing as a wave would yield two simultaneous macro-scale realities. One where the cat is alive and one where the cat is dead. There's a poignant point for today's topic. Although, upon observation, one could see that the cat is either dead or alive, some quantum physicists, such as the late Hugh Everett III, who first proposed that many worlds interpretation in 1957, has speculated that both realities exist, but separately, by the way, in parallel universes. It's important to keep in mind that the many worlds interpretation was developed to explain the results of physics experiments and not the Mandela effect, Nonetheless, Broom believes that her shared memory isn't actually false. That's what I do too. And that she and others who remember a different past were actually in a parallel reality with a different timeline that somehow got crossed with our current one. Meki.
Just very quickly on that. Yes, both realities exist. In fact, all realities exist. Even where the cat is a bird or the cat, has 5 tentacles. It is just a matter of probability. Within our expectational framework, like what we expect reality to look like, we will only observe the most probable outcome on that graph. Okay, so and that's why it's so important, in my opinion, to have everybody on the same page in our context, in the world, right? As a society, as a culture. And yes, there are differences between us, but fundamentally, most of us, not all of us, but most of us expect the same kind of things from reality, right? Up and down, left and right, water is wet, fire is hot, things like that. Right? These are expectations. Why? Because we think that's what reality is. But clearly, and I want you, don't lose me here, guys. Clearly, what I just said, water is wet, fire is hot, up, down, things,
left, right.
Things fall down, they don't fall up, left and right. While we think that's how it should be, they are completely arbitrary. What does that mean, Meki? That's crazy talk. Well, it's not. Because if the superposition and the many worlds theory are both correct, obviously superposition is a thing. We know that's true. We know it's true, right? And we also can speculate that the many worlds interpretation is true. Well, then left and right would be exchanged with up and down, and water could be dry and fire could be cold in some other parallel dimension, very far from ours, because it's not probable here, but it's very probable wherever that is. But in between, there's a whole range of other things that are possible. So, do you understand what I'm saying? We create what we see by our expectation. Anyway, now, most recently, and I'm going back to the article, people on Reddit and other websites have identified further instances of the Mandela effect, including shared memories that the children's book series The Berenstain Bears used to be spelled Berenstein or Berenstein Bears with an E instead of an A. And that there was a movie called Shazam in the 1990s starring the US comedian Sinbad. Regardless of what really happened, there's no denying that shared false memories exist. No shit, Sherlock. Can neuroscience... So look, we have a statement of fact here. Yes, what they call false memory sharing exists. So if you give it a value judgment, false memories in this context, in our reality, they are false memories because our reality says otherwise. They exist. How though, right? Can neuroscience, going back to the article, provide an alternative hypothesis for what's really going on without evoking quantum physics? There are several concepts that might explain something so strange. First, it's important to remember that a memory is made up of a network of neurons in the brain that store the memory. But again, sorry to interject here, as we discussed earlier, Dave, and over a few show cycles as well, the brain itself may very well be functioning on a quantum or with quantum processes at its foundational level. Okay, we've talked about the quantum mind quite a bit. So even if you only talk about the brain and the neurons in the brain, you cannot preclude or exclude or dismiss quantum physics entirely. The physical location, back to the article, the physical location of a memory in the brain is often called an engram or memory trace. During consolidation, the memory trace is transferred from temporary sites, such as the hippocampus, to permanent storage sites in the prefrontal cortex. There are actually some disorders where people can't form long-term memories. They have a short-term memory, that's okay, but then every night, for example, it could just get erased. and they can't form the long-term memories that we're all used to. A prior learning, back to the article, creates a framework of similar memories to be stored in close proximity to each other. This framework is known as a schema. One bit of evidence for this comes from a 2016 study on human semantic memory, long-term memories of ideas and concepts devoid of personal detail. To parse the terrain, researchers used functional magnetic resonance imaging, which is fMRI, to show that similar words are stored in adjacent regions of the brain, and even created a semantic map of language in the human cortex. Another recent study confirmed that shared memory traces organized in similar ways from one individual to the next. Although we might think of memories as being strengthened when recalled, the truth is actually more complex. Recalling a memory reactivates the neurons composing the memory trace, spurring them to form new connections. The altered circuitry then becomes stable again and the memory is reconsolidated. Reconsolidation can reinforce learning over time by strengthening neural connections and allowing the formation of new associations. Dave?
But obviously, taking a memory trace apart and putting it back together again makes that memory vulnerable to losing its fidelity. Here's an example. At some point in their education, most Americans learned that Alexander Hamilton was a founding father, but not a US president. However, when a study on false memory investigated whom most Americans identify as US presidents, the subjects were more likely to incorrectly select Hamilton, but not several actual former presidents. This is likely due to be because neurons encoding information about Hamilton were frequently activated at the same time as neurons encoding information about former presidents. Because I think in their example they're saying Alexander Hamilton was a founding father but not a US president, so the words US president and Hamilton may be going together. Who knows? Because neurons that fire together, wire together, a connection between past presidents and Hamilton could gradually become strong enough that you would incorrectly remember Hamilton as a former president himself. The Hamilton study could also help to explain why groups of people share false memories. As with the mystery of Shazam, first there was a children's movie called Kazam in 1996, starring Shaquille O'Neal as the genie. Then, some people falsely remember other 90s films, perhaps a rip-off of Kazam called Shazam, starring a comedian, Sinbad as a genie. Although Shazam never existed, there are hundreds of people online who claim to remember it. There are several. That also doesn't exist in the show notes at all. That's an alternate universe, Meki, where the word also is in there. There are several reasons for this. First, a large number of general associations increase the probability that a false memory could emerge. Twin films with similar concepts being released around about the same time were common in the 90s. Sinbad had a different movie out the same year called First Kid, which, like Kazam, involves the hero coming to the aid of a wayward boy. And Sinbad had also previously released House Guest in 1995, the poster for which has an image of his head coming out of a mailbox, perhaps abstractly reassembling a genie emerging from a lamp. Sinbad is an Arabic name, and the story of Sinbad the sailor is often associated with encounters with genies. Sinbad's bald head and goatee resemble a typical genie portrayed in the media. Sinbad also dressed up like a genie for a movie marathon he hosted in the 90s. It's all coming together here, which almost certainly contributed to the memory of Sinbad playing a genie. Besides similar associations laying the groundwork for a false memory to form, the other main factors in this instance are confabulation of suggestibility. Meki.
The Redditor Epic Journeyman recounts an extremely detailed account of Shazam from when he was working in a video store in the 1990s. In his post, he describes buying 2 copies of the movie and having to watch each several times to verify that it was damaged after renters complained. He then proceeds to describe the movie plot in great detail. If Shazam never existed, how does he have such a detailed memory of the movie? This is most likely an instance of confabulation, or the brain's attempt to fill in missing memory gaps by adding fabricated facts and experiences. Unlike lying, confabulation is not intended to deceive, and the person confabulating fully believes that the remembered details are real. Now, that's one way of looking at it. The other is that the Mandela effect is real, right? So, look, I don't know. Back to the article. Confabulation is associated with a wide array of neurological disorders, including stroke, brain injury, Alzheimer's, Korsakoff syndrome, epilepsy, and schizophrenia. But it can also happen in healthy subjects, as anyone with the memory of President Hamilton can attest. Instances of confabulation in healthy people increase with age, and are thought to be due to age-related changes to the medial temporal lobe, including the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. These brain regions are important for memory encoding and retrieval, and fMRI studies over the past few decades suggest that decreased functioning in these regions underlies false memory. So essentially, we all have leaky brains and just get used to it, right? back to the article. Confabulation seems to be more frequent in the face of repeatedly unpacking a memory. In other words, someone like Epic Journeyman, which is the Reddit editor, who regularly ordered children's videos and watched them to find damaged tape, is more likely to confabulate a specific memory from that material. So what this is saying here is the more you do something, or the more you try to remember something, or the more often you access a memory, the more likely it is to be false or used in confabulation. That's a very interesting statement if you really think about it. Mm-hmm. Now back to the article, right? A third force driving the Mandela effect is suggestibility, the tendency to believe what others suggest to be true. When misinformation is introduced, it can actually compromise the fidelity of an existing memory. This is exactly why in a court of law, an attorney can object to leading questions that should suggest a specific answer. In short, the leading question, do you remember the 1990s film Shazam that starred Sinbad as a genie, not only suggests that such a film actually exists, but could even insert a false memory of having viewed it. Although it might be tempting to believe that the Mandela effect is evidence that parallel realities exist, or that a universe is a glitchy simulation, a true scientist must test his or her alternative hypothesis by trying to disprove it. In light of known cognitive phenomena that can give rise to shared false memories, it's highly unlikely that some of us are actually from an alternative universe, crossing timelines with the present one. Nonetheless, the Mandela effect is still a fascinating case study in the quirks of human memory. For those who love thinking about how the mind works, it is perhaps even an example of the truth being stranger than fiction. Now, I'd just like to spend a little bit of time on the last paragraph here. It says here, in light of... hoping you would. Right? So it says here, in light of known cognitive phenomena that can give rise to shared false memory, it's highly unlikely that some of us are actually from an alternative universe. I want to say here, why? Why would... Okay, I'm not saying here, and I know confabulation is a thing in psychological terms. I know it happens, and I know that people sometimes, just misremember things. Absolutely, I have no issue with that whatsoever. But then to make the blanket statement that it is highly unlikely that interdimensional alternative universe crossing is impossible or doesn't happen, I find that a little bit disingenuous, because if truly the role of science is to find out what the truth is, then you can't dismiss one of the outcomes out of hand. Is it hard to... Well, but look, Dave, it's hard to
You're
test
absolutely
for.
right. That's absolutely true.
Yeah?
Is it testable? Oh, well, I couldn't test it, so it's not real.
Yeah. So, and this is, again, and I've said this before many, many, many times over the last 6 years, we need a new approach to science. Now, the traditional science approach works fine. The empirical scientific method and all that, it's all good, right? I have no issue with it for things that it works with or works for. Other phenomena that we encounter in our world, in our reality, cannot be done or cannot be investigated in the same fashion. We can't do science in the same way. We need to find a different way of approaching it. And at least one thing we need to do is keep our mind open. If interdimensional travel does not happen, if it's completely impossible, okay, let's find out though. Because if it is possible and these glitches do happen, that has staggering consequences, far-reaching consequences for our entire existence. Massive, right? Now, if this is it, if this world is all there is, then okay, we can just keep on going the way we are. There's no issue here, right? But let's test the theory or the hypothesis or the phenomenon that would have the staggering impact. Let's do that, right? I think.
Do you know what I take from that first sentence, Becky, where it says, in light of known cognitive phenomena that can give rise to shared false memories, it's highly unlikely that some of us are actually from an alternate universe crossing timelines with the present one. Hang on. So I wanted to say the second half of that. It's highly unlikely that some of us are actually from an alternate universe crossing timelines with the present one. Doesn't say it's never happened. It doesn't say that it's a lie or it's untrue. It doesn't say that it's not possible. It just says highly unlikely. Yep. You could describe highly unlikely about your probability of having a car accident tomorrow.
Yep.
That's highly unlikely. It's still possible.
Yep.
I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it'll never happen or hasn't ever happened. It's just highly unlikely. That's an interesting point to pull out of that. So, from this writer's perspective, they're leaving that open when I read that.
Yep.
They're also trying to suggest that it's just false memories and the other one's not likely. Who cares? I don't care about your false memory statement. The whole article is pretty much based trying to push it into the false memory box.
Well, yes, exactly. And that's the purpose, and I get it. That's all cool, right? But and the reason the article is here is because we need to look at all possibilities, obviously, right? But I just, again, like I said, I find it a little disingenuous to simply dismiss something that doesn't make sense. Because if this, again, one thing that we've learned over the last few years, and longer, in fact, is in quantum physics, nothing makes sense. All right? So if we dismiss things simply because they're not common sense, or they don't make sense in the context of our reality, or it goes against what we expect, that, in my book, that's not at all a reason to dismiss it. Because guess what? You would not expect the double slit experiment to turn out the way it did. You wouldn't expect quantum entanglement to exist. You wouldn't expect any of those things to be what they are. But guess what? They are.
They are.
And they're completely verifiable with our limited scientific methods. Completely verifiable. So therefore, it's reputable. You can study it. Doesn't mean that we know what it is, what it means, or how it comes about, but we can get the same result every single time we run the experiment. We can get the same result, which means it's a thing. It's not. It's not a fluke. It's not a false measurement. It's not a mistake. It's a thing. So, and it's again, once more, it goes against every thread of common sense that you have when you look at it, right? So if someone says to me, "Oh, look, it's just that's impossible. It's just doesn't make any sense. It's not reasonable." Well, human reason, and I think we said this some time ago. We left behind cause and effect. Cause and effect. We left behind. They're in the context of our existence, the larger existence, not just our little human existence. Cause and effect don't seem to exist. Let me say this again.
Because time doesn't exist.
Bingo. Right? So cause and effect requires linearity. Okay? like a first, a second, a third. Like it's a stream of events, and this is really where it all falls down. And this is where our limitation comes in as human beings. We are, or have been, designed the way we are and brainwashed the way we are, in order. So we have this concept of linearity. In order, even our, I said this again before, even our basic physiological makeup, our body shape, right, is such that we would think forward and backward, left and right. We think in those dimensions, and forward in our mind is always, onwards. Like if we're moving forward, because we naturally we walk forward, naturally, right? Backwards is a bit harder, so we don't really like to walk. We like to look backwards, and that's okay. But we look forward and we walk forward. So that really shapes our psyche a lot, because if we didn't work that way, if we were like, let's say we're a ball, Dave, we're a ball with sensor rings all around us, right?
Yeah, love this one.
Linearity wouldn't matter. In fact, it is completely irrelevant. In fact, let's assume we're a ball with sensor rings all around us that can float, right? We got we got helium pockets inside. We can float around. We can move any which way we want. We're not earthbound, as it were. Imagine that. Imagine the different psychology that we would have, the different outlook and the different mindset that we would have, right? Completely different. We would not think of history as linear, and we wouldn't think of beginning and end necessarily in that context either, right? So
there would be a lot less wars.
Well, probably.
We wouldn't be able to manufacture anything.
Yeah. So again, we are put into this configuration, in my opinion, because this limitation needed to be introduced. People, entities needed us to be the way we are. Right now, it's going a bit further, but still, do you guys understand what I'm saying? It's very. I know it takes a lot, but just really try to grapple with it.
I completely get it. Meki, I'm just going to put the station break in here for a second because we don't have one at the top of the hour, but I'm just going to put the throw to our video. And while that's going on, and you may not hear the music, but I'm going to say get yourself some great merchandise from the station's website. Buy a CD of your favorite hosts' shows from Revolution Radio for a previous season. Get yourself maybe an EMP-proof thumb drive for this World War III that might happen. It actually contains survival documents as well, which is really nice. You can, instead of simply donating money to the station, you can receive something in return. You can get a 75,000 pack of seeds. Well, it's 75,000 seeds in a pack. But watch your customs. They may not allow you to import that into your country. If you're in North or South America, I think you might be okay, but check your own customs for that. But follow the instructions carefully when you're donating to freedomslips.com. If you're in the US, you can call in to the show, any show at any time on 347-688-2902, or if you have Skype, you can just simply add Freedom Screen. If you live in Kentucky, and I'm going to avoid the rhyme, you can pick us up on FM on WZZR 101.3 or anywhere else in the entire planet, even on the IS, the International Space Station. You can pick us up there because it's got the Earth's internet, and let's hope that technology increases such that we can be anywhere in the entire universe and get this station too. You can use one of these places to look for Revolution Radio Studio A. That's what you're looking for. If you're a fan of shows on Studio B, then look for Studio B. But you're looking on TuneIn.com, Web Radio Central, Receiver mobile app, Freedom Slips Mobile, that's the station's own mobile app. There's also TalkStream Live, there's Streamfinder, Internet-Radio.com, there's Sounds Like a Fish, Radio Tuner, Radio Ways, RadioOnline.co, and the Shiny Side Out has its own app that connects to the station. You can listen to the radio through the app that I made. So guess what? You can do this so many different ways. You choose the one that's right for you. You can even call straight into the station and just listen. Yes, of course, there may be fees involved, and you should only be within the USA to do that, and watch your provider for fees. Just be right on that. Okay, so this is show number 278, and we are talking about the Mandela effect, and it sort of crosses over into dimensional travelers. This description of there being more than one dimension that physics are talking about at the moment, we adhere to, and you know what? It may describe this. This is maybe it. And you know what, Meki? I like the term glitchy simulation from the last thing we spoke about here. The Matrix glitches and deja vu, a glitchy simulation, multiple dimensions. These are all ways of being able to describe it. And the last article we read out said that it's highly unlikely that some of us are from an alternate universe. However, highly unlikely is the same description of you possibly having a car accident tomorrow. It's highly unlikely you may have one. It doesn't mean you won't. It doesn't mean other people aren't having them. I just like that. I may not be completely evident, but I really respect the use of the words and what they really do mean. So if you're trying to describe something, use, I have a propensity for language, Meki. Just saying that you should be very careful about the words you choose. And I think they were very careful about those words. I think that they didn't want to be completely dismissive of it, although they tried to join two things together. But Meki, the multiverse, it's a thing. Quantum physics, string theory, they're all talking about a place other than where we're currently at. So where are we? I mean, I'm touching the desk. I've got a desk in front of me. My microphone is on it. These are real items in a real world that we're all accustomed to. We're in it, we've lived in it, and we have a preconception of how these objects should exist in our world. However, there are some things that can disappear from here, from this physical space, not exist anywhere except for be, a probability. And the probability of anything less than 1 means that you don't know where it is, and when its probability is 1, you know where it is. Well, that's quantum physics describes that about things that are real. They're real and are in our world, but at some point we don't know where they are. And they're not anywhere until we look for them, and then we find them where we expect to look for them. Isn't that crazy? But Meki, is the multiverse itself provable?
That's an excellent question, Dave. Thank you for asking. Which brings us to our next article here, which is in fact titled, "Is the Multiverse Provable?" And big as it is, our universe may be just one of many, all floating in a neatly unfathomable multiverse, scientists say. Problem is, there's been no way to test the idea. And I want to say this here, and I think I said this in the past, but I want to say something very quickly. Many years ago, and I'm saying this was probably the late 80s and early 90s, I had a discussion with my friend, and we were talking about these things. And I said, you know what? It's all bubbles. The reality is all bubbles. Universe is all bubbles. All bubbles. And recently, I picked up a copy of Scientific American, and that's exactly how they represent the multiverse on the front cover. Bubbles, like next to bubbles and bubbles and bubbles. So each universe, of course, being represented as a bubble. So my point is that the next evolution of intelligence, in my opinion, is intuition. And back then, it's almost 30 years ago, I intuitively visualized the bubble universe. Or in my mind, it made the most sense from what I knew of the nature of reality, at least. It had all be bubbles. But I don't want to digress. So just don't dismiss your gut feel. Don't dismiss your intuition. It might take 30 years, but you might get proven right after all. Now, back to the article. The problem, as I said, there's been no way to test the idea of the multiverse. Now, this article is from 2011. Now, physicists say they've devised a way to detect bruises from our cosmos's supported or purported collisions with other universes. So our universe bumping into other universes. The international team has created a new computer algorithm to hunt for such irregularities in our universe, which they say would be disc-shaped. Think of the temporary circular flattening that happens when one beach ball bumps into another. Have you got the picture in your mind? So, where they touch, it's sort of flat? Because the multiverse would likely have expanded so fast that its universes would have been pulled far apart shortly after the creation. Collisions would likely have occurred only during our universe's infancy. Luckily, modern telescopes are able to study a sort of faint baby picture of the universe, the cosmic microwave background. The CMB is radiation emitted by the hot plasma that dominated the universe up until about 380,000 years after the Big Bang, which is thought to have... Yeah, go ahead.
It's 3 degrees Kelvin, by the way.
Yes, that's correct. Which is thought to have occurred more than 13 billion years ago. For quite a while, people have suggested or suspected there might be other bubble universes, but they thought this was completely untestable, said theoretical physicist Matthew Johnson of the Perimeter Institute. We now have a way to look for signals predicted by the theory. That we're able to test these ideas, period, is huge. And due largely to the development of the new software and improved mapping of the CMB, said Johnson, a co-author of 2 recent studies describing the new algorithm to be published in future issues of the journals Physical Review Letters and Physical Review D. Dave?
Indeed. Cosmic dense or random patterns. The multiverse, if it exists, may have sprung out of a chaotic fluctuation of empty space. Several bubble universes, similar to our own, but perhaps with slightly different physical laws, would have appeared about the same time and bumped against each other before diffusing across the multiverse. The new algorithm offers a systematic, statistics-backed way to search for subtle evidence of these possible crashes in the mostly smooth pattern of the CMB, something that may be impossible for humans alone. Promising results. The algorithm has so far found 15 interesting features. 4 of these looked especially promising, but statistical analysis suggests chance is the best explanation for these features, according to co-author Johnson. It may be that the current maps of the CMB are simply not sharp enough to catch the presumably slight shifts that would indicate an inter-universal hit and run. Big Earth-Shattering Discovery is the next title. Even with better data from Planck, remember the Planck constant is one to the minus 39, it's very small. Even the better data from Planck, finding evidence of a of a universe-to-universe smash-up, it's a game of chance, thanks to the nearly infinite possible outcomes. If major collisions happen and are detectable, however, they will have left behind something. A cooler temperature, a warmer one, irregularities in the density of matter, or some other significant disturbance. And there's a quote here from Caltech's Carroll, Carroll from Caltech. It's a long shot, but it would be such a big earth-shattering discovery that it's worth the effort. Earth-shattering kaboom! If these guys discover the multiverse, it will forever change how we view our universe. Well,
of course it would.
Our universe, not all of them. Meki, there's a graphic that I had up before, and it shows like a there. It's right there on the screen now. It's like just multiple sort of clear balls everywhere
Yes.
with roughly the same light star signs as stars inside them. Very interesting. I found that one in particular particularly interesting because it highlighted not both your vision of the bubbles, but the way the firmament is described in the Bible. And that was what I was really interested in, trying to find something that matched that. Because I think what they were describing was something they didn't have any clue about.
Look,
and that was the
you
best
know
they
what
came up with.
Actually, and thank you for bringing that up, Dave, because before we go on to the final article here, the final article for this series, I believe very firmly that there's a lot of ancient knowledge that is still with us, that has been decoded in a number of ways, and the number 7 happens to be one of them. And I don't care what culture you belong to, and in fact, so many fairy tales have the number 7 as something in there. I wonder if the number 7 is not indicative potentially of the number of dimensions, maybe, or the number of coordinates, excuse me, that you would need to find your way in the multiverse potentially, right? I mean, this ancient knowledge we can't just dismiss, and there is these numbers. They're there. 7 is probably the most significant one, right? And 9, 13 are there as well, but 7 is everywhere. It's with us in the most mundane way possible. Sergio, Sergio just asserts that. Sorry, this is from the chat room, everybody. If you're listening to this on YouTube, you can actually come and join the chat room and be part of the conversation. But Sergio in the chat room just seems to assert that we are flat earthers. No, nothing could be further from the truth. We have in fact done a show cycle on the flat Earth, completely, and I do, yeah, completely. So no, we are as far from flat earthers as you can possibly get. But the point is that these ancient numerical clues, the 7, specifically the 7, have meaning beyond the meaning they have in the fairy tales, right? That's why they're remembered. And there are other numbers and there are other concepts as well. And we will discover them as we go along. But I say here on air that the 7 will be extremely significant going forward as we explore, I guess, quantum physics and the multiverse as well. I think the number 7 is significant. I don't know why yet. I don't know exactly how, but I can guarantee you the number 7 holds significance above and beyond its due. Now, having said all of that, what would it mean for us if we in fact lived in a multiverse? Well, for one, it would broaden our horizons beyond the universe in which we're in. And I mean, this universe is enormous. But imagine this universe multiplied an infinite number of times. It is simply a breathtaking vista to behold. And maybe if we found a way to travel between those dimensions, we would fixate on something other than conflict and war. But Dave, before we can do any of that, any of the travel, do we have any evidence of any parallel universes?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. To many, these past 12 months seem as if we have already slipped into parallel universe. But Brexit and Trump are nothing compared to the alternate universes some astronomers are contemplating. Stuart Clark writes across the universe for The Guardian. He is author of The Unknown Universe, head of Zeus. On Wednesday, the 17th of May 2017, there was a last modified date also of, this is obviously from when the page came from, Thursday, 18th of May. They call it the multiverse. It's a cosmos in which there are multiple universes. And by multiple, I mean an infinite number. These uncountable realms sit side by side in higher dimensions that our senses are incapable of perceiving directly. Yet, increasingly, astronomers and cosmologists seem to be invoking the multiverse to explain puzzling observations. The stakes are high. Each alternate universe carries its own different version of reality. there will be one where you wrote this column and I read it. One where The Guardian is an alternate right propaganda rag. Even a reality weird one, even a really weird one in which Donald Trump uses Twitter to spread nothing but amusing cat videos. That's very funny. It sounds bonkers, I know, but the latest piece of evidence that could favour a multiverse comes from the UK's Royal Astronomical Society. We've actually mentioned it before, the RAS. They recently published a study on the so-called cold spot. This is a particularly cool patch of space seen in radiation produced by the formation of the universe more than 13 billion years ago. Meki.
And in a way, this is leading on from the previous article. Remember, guys, when they were looking for evidence? So this cold spot was first glimpsed by NASA's WMAP satellite in 2004. And then confirmed by the European Space Agency's Planck mission in 2013. It is supremely puzzling. I love it when scientists say this, because it means they don't know. Most astronomers and cosmologists believe that it is highly unlikely to have been produced by the birth of the universe, as it is mathematically difficult for the leading theory, which is called inflation, to explain. Now, that obviously there's an issue here. I mean, we don't know if inflation is a sound theory or not. I mean, it's the going theory at the moment, but it could still be.
But that supports the Big Bang theory. That's the problem.
That's correct. Exactly.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, just to divert very quickly, or digress, I should say, from this. Everything we think we know, we don't. Most of the things we talk about are theories. And even if you talk about gravity, you talk about evolution, you talk about the formation of the universe, all of these things are essentially theories. Okay, guys. So and what we try to do, and what all scientists should try to do, is to explore the truth, try to explore what actually happens. So, but again, at the moment, the most accepted or widely accepted theory, as far as the universe is concerned, is called inflation. Now, this latest study, to go back to the article, claims to rule out a last-ditch prosaic explanation that the cold spot is an optical illusion produced by a lack of intervening galaxies. One of the study's authors, Professor Tom Shanks of Durham University, told the RAS, "We can't entirely rule out that the spot is caused by an unlikely fluctuation explained by the standard theory of the Big Bang. But if that isn't the answer, then there are more exotic explanations. Perhaps the most exciting of these ideas is that the cold spot was caused by a collision between our universe and another bubble universe. If further, more detailed analysis proves this to be the case, then the cold spot might be taken as the first evidence for the multiverse." Like I said, this pretty much leads on directly from the previous article. Heady stuff, you say, yes. But the irony is that if there's a multiverse, scientists will have to accept that the ultimate goal of physics, to explain why a universe is the way it is, could be forever out of reach. The end game for physics has been to provide the reason why our universe takes the form it does. To do this, it must explain why certain fundamental quantities have the values they do. For example, speed of light, the mass of an electron, the strength of the gravitational interaction. If there's a multiverse, however, that quest could be doomed to failure, Dave.
Oh, good on you. Oh, there he is. Just as there are an infinite number of similar yet slightly different universes, like the one in which you have written this column, not me, there will also be an infinite number in which the basic laws of physics are different. That's such a big presumption. So every possible combination of physics is tried out across the multiverse, inevitably then by nothing more than blind luck, at least one will have the conditions we see around us today. It's just a big old accident, and that hardly seems very satisfying. One of the most vocal opponents to the multiverse theory is, ironically, one of its original architects, Paul Steinhardt. Princeton University helped develop inflation, the theory of the origin of the universe. It's one that struggles to explain the cold spot, whilst also giving rise to the multiverse because, according to its maths, once a universe starts to form, it triggers more to be born ad infinitum. However, Steinhardt turned against his own theory. In 2014, he told Scientific American magazine, and I quote, "Our observable universe would be just one possibility out of a continuous spectrum of outcomes. So we have not explained any feature of the universe by introducing inflation after all. We have just shifted the problem of the original Big Bang model. How can we explain our simple universe when there is nearly infinite variety of possibilities that could emerge from the one Big Bang?" I added the word one. To the inflationary model, how can we explain our simple universe when there is nearly infinite variety of possibilities that could emerge from the multiverse? End quote. Put this way, a multiverse doesn't sound attractive. It would cut to the very heart of physics. Purpose, nature, of course, doesn't care about this. Maybe the cosmos really is the way, this way, and we just have to accept it. Certainly, there are many who are willing to defend the multiverse as a valid direction of thought. Last point, comfortingly, if we do live in a multiverse, we can be assured that somewhere out there is an alternate version of you and me that have already figured all this out and won a Nobel Prize for the effort.
That's right. Now, look, the reason we are bringing all this up is to make everybody understand that our scientific community is still searching for answers, and good on them for that as well. And everything is still very uncertain. So we have not reached a state of certainty. People like to talk and behave as though we have. Oh, we know everything there is to know. No, let's just
you so don't.
Right, exactly. And this is really the key thing here. And we like to share this because it has fundamental implications for the way the way we live, in the way we should live, in the way that society works, and in the way that our reality works. Because our reality is not at all what we think it is. Okay, we have a certain preconceived idea of what it should be again, and that's unfortunately completely incorrect. It takes a child a long time to come to terms with this reality. I don't know if you have children or you are around children a bit, but it takes them a long time before they come to grips with all of this, like simple things like walking, gravity, talking, making visual sense of the world, fitting in with our society. This is a hard slog, and it takes years. It takes the child years and years to learn. Right now, why should that be? You look at some of the other species on this planet, animal species, where the child or the young animal is born completely functional into this world. Right? They're born and up. They're moving about. They're doing whatever they're doing. Not every species, but quite a few, and only a few species like ours need this adjustment period. So my argument is that wherever we are before this is completely different to here, obviously, and it takes time for us to come to terms with our limited capabilities here, where things can trip you up in the dark, where you have to tell people what you want, things like that. So it is really important to think beyond where we are and to think to where we should be or could be or have been, right? I don't believe that we actually have any limitations. I don't think we have any limitations on us. I think we are completely aware of everything on a subconscious level. This physical shell, this body, this prison that we're in, limits us, right? But beyond that, we are aware, and that's, again, the dream state we talked about in the past, and now science is coming to similar conclusions. Well, maybe there's a multiverse. There's infinite regression, right? There's simply no end to any of this, which pays complete heed to the idea of linearity. If truly there's a multiverse, I would even go as far as saying there is no beginning, there is no end. Okay, there's just a circular, there's just a cyclical existence, or in fact, just existence in totality. Again, time. In our mind, time flows in one direction or in another direction. It doesn't matter, but I don't think it does. I don't think it does. And this is really the kicker here, right? We have been brainwashed on a very fundamental level into believing what this should be, right? And that's big, and that's necessary. So it is what it is. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we have been brainwashed to think a certain way in order to make sure that what reality is what we think it is, right? This is what quantum decoherence is, right? So in quantum decoherence, the superposition simply decays to our reality, but it only does so because we expect it to. And this specific one as well. This is the one we are living in right now is the most probable outcome for us of any potential action or event, right? And you live moment from moment from moment. If you lived your life in totality, imagine that. Imagine there's no beginning, end, past, future, only the eternal now, right? Only the eternal now. And you live your life in totality. And obviously for us, it's completely inconceivable how that would actually work, because we are so used to thinking in linear events, past, present, future. But imagine how much we would get out, I guess, out of existence if in fact we didn't have this time constraint. And my point is, though, that science is moving in that direction, right? Science is moving in that direction, almost like Buddhist concepts of timelessness, right? Of non-space. There's no space, there's no time. There is no spoon, in fact, right? It's popularized by the Matrix. There is no spoon. It's like the kid tells Neo that the trick is not to try to bend
the spoon with your mind. Mm-hmm.
The trick is to realize there is no spoon. There is no spoon. And this is really what it is. So we have been brainwashed, we have been indoctrinated from birth for a long, long time on a very fundamental, basic level that this reality is the way it is. And we have been indoctrinated and brainwashed in order for this reality to be as it is. Right? It's actually amazing if you think about it. Because without us, and without us believing it should be this way, it wouldn't be this way. So it needs us. I know, right?
Yeah, completely.
Once you get your mind around it, you go, what? No, hey, what? And at that point, it all falls apart, because how do you escape that? How do you not think like you? How do you jump over your own shadow? And that's where no mind and nirvana comes in, right? This is where all these Eastern religions and philosophies have, I think, really hooked into something, right? In my opinion. I don't know, Dave, too esoterical? What do you think?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'll come out on the limb with you. It's all good. So, you've heard my perspective. When I heard that last person talking about the multiverse and going against their expansionism, I'm going to call it expansionism. That's the Big Bang Theory, where everything came out from a single point. I'd always thought that all the black holes joined back together again at some point in the future, having consumed all of the matter around them and becoming too large, but just within and beneath the line which I would draw in the sand, which would be the tipping point at which it can no longer be a black hole. Like not just a supermassive black hole, but one that was so extreme that it just popped. So from what we understand about the star's mass, a star can only be certain size, and it will not be able to maintain itself as a star and explode, and then forming smaller stars in the same region, and then they'll live for a certain amount of time, and then they'll explode and have smaller stars. And so it starts with one big one, lots of smaller ones, lots of very smaller ones, and then as a third or fourth generation star in that same region, you may have something like our sun. I went along that path and decided that there must be something, some size issue with all of the matter in a black hole. That you know, once it consumed everything in the universe, what would happen to it? I believe that it would no longer be able to do what it does and would explode. Now, having an expansionism or a Big Bang theory means there was a universe before then. Where are all the people that lived in that?
Mm-hmm.
It would have been on for a gazillion years before it had imploded upon itself. So if there was purely nothing, and then there was everything we can see out there, and obviously past what we can see, because you know, if you pop your head up out of your backyard, you may only be able to visibly see, you know, 10 or 12 houses down from where you live, but there's a whole suburb around you, and then a city around that, and then a country, and then eventually the planet. So from your perspective, scientists, are you really only willing to comment on the local vicinity? Are you able to comment on what there might have been before the Big Bang, if that's where you want to go with it? The whole concept of them was so limiting in what it could achieve and what it could describe. I think the multiverse thing is perfect. It's probably the most perfect thing we've come up with so far. It also explains why there isn't as much mass as where they expect. It eliminates the need for, you know, matter and antimatter, you know, God and the devil. Why create the devil? Because we have a God. Why create antimatter? Because there's matter. There must be then an opposite to it, surely. Why must there be? You just believe there must be, and so you made one. Humans have this thing, Meki, where if we imagine it, it's real. That's where fear comes from. Fear is imaginary. Mm-hmm. And we make it real by a chemical that's produced which causes fear. It's our imagination. So, winding it back to the multiverse, well, the multiverse seems to me to be perfect. Whether or not it's exactly the way that people say, where Meki, you and I exist, but, you know, we're in a different thing doing something else. Maybe we never met. Does it have to be like that? Or maybe it isn't. Maybe they're all just completely separate, like when you go to a zoo and the monkeys are on their own, and the giraffes are in their own habitat. Maybe these are separate habitats. Maybe there's an overarching controlling species that plucks you out and puts you in, or maybe it's an accidental thing where you can traverse between multiverses, between universes. Maybe it's entirely accidental. Maybe it wasn't part of the program, and I'm going to take it back to the virtual thing. On my computer, you know, I've got a pretty nice computer. I can have tons of programs running at the same time. A memory leak from one to the next, I've never seen it, but maybe it could be possible to have some data from one of the programs in another one. Is that what's going on? You know? So, out of all the things we've imagined so far in the human history, this knowledge bank that's human history that you're supposed to have learnt when you go to school, but they skip anything current. Is that all we are? Is that all we've been? Is this all we're going to be? I'd love to be able to get to the point and where we had, phase shifting, and we could go with, I'm going to hold up my mobile phone, and here we go, my cell phone. I'm going to load up an app. I don't want to be in this reality. It's going to change myself 90 degrees out of phase, and suddenly the house is different. I'm no longer in this house at this location. I'm somewhere else. Is that where we can go? Is that what's possible? Is that what's round the corner? Invisibility is only a small portion of the EM spectrum. All we have to do is go out of phase. It's that easy. Is it that easy to go between universes? Is it that easy to mistakenly be swapped with someone else, with you in the other, alternate reality, where you had a different existence, or you made a different choice, or it's V'd off. Here's esoteric for you, Mekki. It's V'd off because of a choice you made. It's V'd off because you decided not to behave in the way that your deja vu showed you. Maybe deja vu is the crossing over of the two universes, of the multiverse, of a different dimension. And you get the choice of which one you get to go down. Maybe that's what it is.
Maybe. But see, this is the kicker, right? And in fact, anything is possible. Not only that, Dave, anything is probable. This is really where we're at. It is no longer a question of what's possible and what's impossible. We've moved beyond that. That's gone. Bye-bye. And we are now living in the world of, well, what's the probability of this for us in our reality here, right? And what's the probability of this? And what's the probability of that? And the answer is right now we are living within certain probability parameters that are completely self-imposed, or well, self-imposed to the extent that they were imposed upon us. But now it's just a self-perpetuating system. So anything is probable. How probable determines what nature this universe takes. And the sooner we can get on top of that, the sooner we can actually agree that we have this power, Dave, to change anything, even if this is a computer simulation, or maybe especially if this is a computer simulation.
Oh,
right. Let's we could move, but even if it isn't, okay, then it's important that we change the collective unconscious, right? The Akashic record, the collective human mind, as it were, or the collective sentient mind of the universe, or whatever it is, right? If there's such a thing, because we are only here for one reason. And that's, in my opinion, that's quantum decoherence. It's the only reason we're here. We're here to make sure that this universe keeps on existing. Okay, that's it.
Oh, I like that. That's Schrodinger's.
I know.
Hang on. Though, right? I'll get to it in a second.
I just want to have a quick shout out to Diet Joke in the chat room. Diet Joke, redemption, as you so nicely put it, actually implies the concept of a prime mover with a pittingly provincial set of ethics and morals. So I don't believe in redemption per se, because I don't think there's anybody out there that could redeem me. I think that redemption or the improvement or whatever it might be of yourself is your responsibility. No one else's. You are responsible for yourself. In any self-respecting philosophy or religion, you are responsible. This is why I've got a problem with this whole savior concept.
Oh, very nice.
That's because it takes responsibility away from you. Oh no, you don't worry about it. Just go over to that guy. He'll look after you. No. No. I'm sorry. I think you are completely responsible for everything you do, and there's no one out there that can, if you believe in sin, can take that away from you, right? That's my opinion only, and I know there'll be a lot of haters out there, which is fine. I get it. It's cool. But my opinion is you have to take responsibility, complete responsibility for everything you do and think, for that, right? Because we create this universe as we go along. And this universe wouldn't exist unless we were creating it as we went along. It's worse than the Panopticon, Dave. It is.
It sure is.
Right?
I like Schrodinger's humanity.
Yeah.
We only exist to perpetuate ourselves, and if we weren't here, it would never happen.
That's bang, right? And if you don't look, it isn't there.
That's right.
That's it's
Now,
a kicker. It really is.
Now we have a guest.
Oh, we have a caller
calling in, and we have a caller. It's very rare. So welcome to Shiny Side Out.
Hello. You're on the air?
You're on the air. Nick?
Or not?
Or not? I can't hear you, Nick. That's all right. That's
Okay.
it. No, we have no audio from Nick, but that's okay.
Okay.
There we go. So, well, we nearly did. Think about
Sorry,
that.
Nick, but if you're in the chat room, Nick, maybe you can type your contribution as well.
Absolutely.
Look, we of course we're more than open to for people to dial in if you so desire, and we have in the past. Usually, though, it's hard to get through the show notes in time. Today we managed to, so we've actually finished the cycle on the Mandela effect, and which then of course took us into interdimensional travel, multiverse, and so forth. So, and again, now you need to understand, guys, that this is not just stuff that's science fiction. This is not stuff we're making up. They're earnest scientific investigations into these phenomena, and these are scientific theories. But again, they're theories, right? No one is claiming to know the truth here. That's hubris, and neither Dave or I would ever claim that we know the truth. We can only ever hope to search for the truth. We can only ever hope to be, the person that tries to seek out that. Well, maybe that's whatever is most truthful, whatever comes closest to explaining why we are here, how we are here, what it all means. These are fundamental questions, and they're important. And I know it's Saturday night for a lot of you, and it's Sunday afternoon for us here. So it is the ultimate question, really. What this entails. The question is the why and the how. Why?
Well, they've been asked.
and how.
They've been asked for centuries.
Yeah,
Who
as
are
long
we,
as
and why
exist.
are we here? And so,
That's it.
but you know what? Even though that same question has been asked since we probably first looked up at the stars and tried to work out what they were, we worked out who we were in the scheme of things. And those questions are still live. We never knew. We didn't build a computer which told us to go away while it thought about it. And then said 42 was the answer.
Yep.
But there isn't an ultimate... There's no help desk. There's no international help desk we can call to find out. Not that I know of. Maybe Nick can reiterate his question. Nick, welcome to Shiny Side Out.
Hi,
Hello.
can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Oh, hear me. Well, you're talking about the basic foundation of the universe, right?
Reality. Yeah, the basic foundation of reality. Yes.
The basic foundation of what we see in front of us. And that's what I wanted to talk about. you are trying to, with the information that you have found in front of you. It could be the mainstream media. It could be. Am I staticky?
Yeah, way
A
too
little bit, yeah.
staticky. Yep,
But it's better now.
it is better now. Don't move the cable.
Yeah, I'm trying to not move the cable because you were talking about the foundation of the universe, and I'm not claiming to say that I have. I'm telling you that mankind is.
I'm sorry, I couldn't keep that going. It was terrible. The audio was so bad that you wouldn't want to listen to it. I'm sorry, Nick.
But I really wanted to hear what he had to say.
I want the question too, but you know, it's you've got to think about the people who are listening back. So,
yeah, that's fair, that's fair.
Nick, if you can, either fix the cable up so it doesn't make the crackling noises, or by all means jump in the chat room and flick us the same question. That's easier.
I think it wasn't. I don't think it was so much a question as rather a statement.
Oh right, okay.
So I think he was going to give us some information. So Nick, if you have this information, please either email us or come into the chat or try to dial in with a static free line if you can.
All right.
That would be.
I think he's back again. Nick, we're going to try one more time. Go ahead.
How's this?
It's better. Don't move the cable. All right, go ahead.
Okay. I won't move the mic. I promise.
All right.
You were talking about the foundation of the universe, right? And I'm not claiming to say that I have the answer to the foundation of the universe, but you know what? We have communication issues, right? And Skype is not the only blame. It's not the only blame. It's not Skype. We are divided, and we don't need to be, you know. And it's all about just getting by, getting with your associations, you know. And I don't know where to go from here, but I happen to be able to communicate right now. and it's always, you know, just about friendship and about okay, I got to say this, okay. As long as I breathe, there's no one who is unloved. There can't be anyone who is unloved. As long as I can draw breath. That's what I gotta say. Because, you know, as long as you love everybody, you can't go wrong. I mean, love is the destructor of all evil.
I agree.
Periodo. You know, that's all you gotta say. Where you go from here, Mike Reilly has to tell you. Because it's only about the stage. You know, you can say the world is a stage, but really only the mind is the stage. Beyond that, it's only what you project.
I completely agree, and that's exactly the point, Nick. That's exactly right. So
Right.
you've put it into a very nice way here, and you're right. Whatever you project is of the and be it thought or action, it doesn't really matter. Both are equally important, and in fact, you know, directed thought, intentional prayer, all these things are important. And you're 100% correct that it's exactly the intent that you send out to the universe, your immediate environment, your thoughts, your deeds, everything that creates this reality. So you're 100% correct. So if we all did in fact love each other, I mean, you know, a lot of people will smirk right now, then we wouldn't have an issue. We wouldn't have a problem. You're 100% correct. It is the fundamental truth that a lot of people have tried to tell us in the past over and over and over again, right? This is all you have to do, right? But most of us don't. And in fact, most of us are actively discouraged from doing exactly that, which is really problem. Okay, Dave, is it possible that we lost the studio?
No, we haven't. Actually, looks like we might have lost.